Kenpachi Zaraki stands out as one of the most iconic characters within all of Bleach. He is a captain who defines himself entirely through combat. Over the course of the series, we quickly identified that Kenpachi deliberately avoids completely defeating his opponents, not out of mercy, but from his selfish desire to fight them again once they've grown stronger. This battle philosophy makes him simultaneously terrifying and fascinating. He is a character who perceives battle not as a means to an end, but as life's ultimate purpose. Kenpachi is quite an anomaly even amongst the Gotei 13, as he's never attended the Shinigami Academy and he's bypassed all of the formal qualification requirements to become a captain, and for most of Bleach he couldn't even communicate with his own Zanpakuto. Despite his abnormal beginnings, or perhaps because of them, Kenpachi ended up evolving into one of the most fearsome fighters within the history of the Soul Society. From his debut fight against Ichigo in the Soul Society arc all the way up until his appearances within the Can't Fear Unworld light novels. The journey that Kenpachi goes on via all of the different battles that he partakes in showcases a character whose relationship with power is unlike anybody else's within Bleach. Be sure to stick around until the very end of the video, as I'll be looking at fights that Kenpachi partakes in within the Can't Fear Unworld light novels and the Spirits Are Forever With You light novel. So let's break down all of the battles of Kenpachi Zaraki. Also, just to let you know, I've launched an all-new channel called Super Alpha EX, where I discuss games, give my thoughts on different reviews and commentaries on whatever I feel passionate about. The first is on the Nintendo Switch 2, then I've got a video discussing everything that you need to know about GTA 6, and I've recently uploaded a top 10 video breaking down all of the must-play games of 2025. If you enjoy all of the Bleach videos that I'm making and you want to see other content, then definitely subscribe to that new channel. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. So the title of Kenpachi carries immense weight within the Soul Society. It's not just an ordinary name, but it's a title that is reserved exclusively for the strongest Shinigami within the Soul Society in that given era of time. This title is usually earned by somebody who has slain the most enemies and won the most battles. Throughout the history of the Soul Society, only the most fearsome individuals have earned this title, with Retsu Unohana being the very first to claim it over a millennium ago. And in between we had individuals like Soya Azashiro and Kenpachi Kuriyashiki who also held the title of Kenpachi. Now, Kenpachi Zaraki's story starts in the most lawless part of the Soul Society, and this is the 80th district of Northern Rukongai, which is called Zaraki. Now, this district represents the absolute worst of the Soul Society. It's a place where murder and theft are commonplace. Having no name to call his own for as long as he could remember, Kenpachi eventually adopted the name Zaraki from the district where he was raised. Now, this namelessness would later prove to be a significant point, as it's a reflection of the disconnect that he would feel later with his own Zanpakuto. As a young boy, Kenpachi wandered through dangerous streets as he came upon the corpse of a Shinigami. Now, from this dead Shinigami, he had taken his Asauchi, the nameless Zanpakuto that every Shinigami is given within the academy, and through continuous use of this blade, he eventually imprinted his soul upon the Zanpakuto. What made Kenpachi exceptional from the very beginning was his natural affinity for combat. Without any formal training whatsoever, he had developed into a lethal swordsman, and this was through instinct and countless battles that he had partaken in. The definitive moment of Kenpachi's youth had come when he had encountered Yachiru Unohana, the original Kenpachi. During their battle, Kenpachi experienced fear for the very first time, and paradoxically, this was also the first fight that he had genuinely enjoyed after growing bored with easily defeating everyone else. This encounter fundamentally changed Kenpachi, as he subconsciously started to limit his own power just to prolong the exhilarating experience of a challenging battle. Years following this, while Kenpachi was traveling through the 79th district of Rukongai, he had come upon a young girl who had shown no fear of his blood-soaked appearance or his Zanpakuto. He ended up naming this young girl Yachiru after the only person that he had ever admired, and from that day forward, the two became inseparable. Very few had realized this until much later on, but in actuality Yachiru wasn't merely his adopted daughter or lieutenant, but she was actually a manifestation of his Zanpakuto spirit. Kenpachi's notorious battle philosophy was cemented during his encounter with Ikkaku Madarame before he had joined the Gote 13. After he had defeated Ikkaku, he left him alive, as Kenpachi responded to his demand to be finished off with words that would become his personal code. He tells Ikkaku, "Don't admit defeat and seek death. Die first, then admit defeat. When you lose but don't die, it just means you are lucky. At those times, think only about survival. Survive and think only about killing the guy who failed to kill you." Kenpachi eventually entered the Serete and he had challenged Kenpachi Giganjo, the captain of the 11th Division. He had killed him with a single strike in front of over 200 members of the division, thus claiming both the captaincy and the title of Kenpachi through the trial of combat. Shortly following this, Yamamoto forced Kenpachi to learn the basics of Kendo, but the Central 46 ordered the training to be stopped after just one day, fearing what would happen if Kenpachi realized his full potential and if he were to have rebelled against the Gote 13. We now turn our attention towards Kenpachi's first major battles within Bleach, which occurred during the Soul Society arc. Kenpachi's battle against Ichigo establishes not only his immense strength but also the complicated psychology behind his combat style. After learning from Ikkaku that one of the Ryoka Ichigo had defeated him, Kenpachi becomes fixated on finding this potential opponent. Their encounter starts in chapter 103 with Kenpachi's spiritual pressure alone nearly paralyzing Hanataro and Ganju. What makes this confrontation immediately fascinating is Kenpachi's bizarre approach. He actually offers Ichigo the first strike during their battle, completely unguarded, allowing him to hit anywhere that he wishes. When Ichigo's attack fails to even scratch Kenpachi, we witness the very first revelation about Kenpachi's power. And this is that his tremendous Reiatsu functions as a natural armor, as it causes Ichigo's hands to bleed from the recoil of his own attack. As the fight with Ichigo continues, Kenpachi explains a fundamental principle of Shinigami combat. When two spiritual forces collide, the weaker one absorbs the damage. He states that Ichigo's maximum spiritual energy is weaker than what leaks from him unconsciously. This seemingly impossible gap in power forces Ichigo to flee for a brief moment as he rethinks his approach to this fight. When Ichigo returns with newfound resolve, he finally manages to wound Kenpachi. In response to this, Kenpachi expresses childlike excitement. Rather than being angered by being cut, he is actually thrilled at finding an opponent who is capable of challenging him. Kenpachi enjoying being injured within battle becomes a defining trait of his character as the story progresses. Now, the philosophical clash between both of these characters reveals a lot about Kenpachi's worldview. When Ichigo begins to hear his Zanpakuto Zangetsu more clearly, Kenpachi dismisses this connection, declaring that Zanpakuto are merely tools and that relying on them shows weakness. This fundamentally different approach to strength versus Ichigo's growing bond with his Zanpakuto highlights Kenpachi's solitary reliance on raw power, and these themes become the central tension of this fight between Ichigo and Kenpachi. As the fight escalates, Kenpachi eventually removes his eye patch, which in fact is a power limiter that was created by the Shinigami Research and Development Institute, as it seals the majority of Kenpachi's spiritual energy. With this restraint removed, his destructive power increases dramatically as he slices a building in half with casual ease. At the same time, Ichigo achieves a deeper connection with Zangetsu as he temporarily accesses his hollow-influenced power. In their final clash, both of them stake everything on a single strike as the battle ends in a technical draw, though Kenpachi acknowledges defeat as he falls unconscious shortly after Ichigo. This outcome seems to be very confusing. How could a captain with decades of experience lose to a teenager who had only recently become a Shinigami? The light novel Spirits Are Forever With You gives some crucial answers to this via Aizen's breakdown, as he states that Kenpachi subconsciously limits his power in order to match his opponents. The psychological mechanism, which is core to understanding Kenpachi's character, automatically adjusts his spiritual pressure in order to create an enjoyable fight rather than an immediate victory for him. Against Ichigo, whose power surged unexpectedly through his deepening connection with Zangetsu, Kenpachi's adaptive instincts couldn't recalibrate quickly enough in order to counter this rapid growth. Kenpachi's second notable fight in the Soul Society arc pits him against fellow captains Seijin Komamura and Kaname Tozen, who end up confronting him for assisting the Ryoka. This fight showcases Kenpachi's tactical adaptability despite his brute force reputation. When Tozen activates his Bankai Enma Korogi, Kenpachi is completely deprived of his senses as he is unable to see, hear, smell, or even sense spiritual pressure. Rather than panicking, Kenpachi adapts by relying on his sense of touch in order to predict attacks. He deliberately allows himself to be struck by Tozen's blade, creating an opportunity to grab Suzumushi and nullify the Bankai. This very clever counter demonstrates that beneath Kenpachi's battle-hungry exterior lies a surprisingly perceptive mind when it comes to combat. These Soul Society arc battles mark the beginning of Kenpachi's journey towards understanding his true potential. Following his battle with Ichigo, he acknowledges the pain of not having known his Zanpakuto's name, and he makes his first attempt to communicate with his blade. This is a significant shift for someone who previously viewed Zanpakuto as mere tools. Kenpachi's next major fight occurs during the Hueco Mundo arc, where he confronts the 5th Espada Noitra Gilga. This fight represents a significant evolution in Kenpachi's combat approach, and it reveals how much that he has grown since his fight with Ichigo. This fight starts dramatically when Kenpachi arrives within Hueco Mundo alongside captains Byakuya, Mayuri, and Unohana. He immediately saves Ichigo from Tessera with a casual slash, as he highlights the massive power gap between a lieutenant level Arrancar and a captain of the Gotei 13. When Ichigo expresses surprise at the captain's arrival, Kenpachi explains that Yamamoto instructed Urahara to secure a route to Hueco Mundo. This shows us a rare instance of Kenpachi actually following orders rather than acting solely on personal desires. So Noitra does present a very unique challenge for Kenpachi. The Espada's iron skin is reportedly the hardest amongst all of the Arrancar. This defense initially prevents Kenpachi from cutting Noitra effectively, as it leads to a moment where Kenpachi actually appears to be outmatched. Rather than becoming frustrated by this, he grows increasingly excited by the challenge as he methodically tests different approaches until he successfully is able to land a cutting blow. What's fascinating about this fight is how it reveals Kenpachi's learning curve. With each exchange, he adapts to the density of Noitara's iron skin, as he gradually increases his cutting power. This adaptability runs counter to the common perception of Kenpachi as a one-dimensional fighter relying solely on brute strength. Here we see Kenpachi making real-time adjustments in order to overcome his opponent's seemingly impenetrable defense. This fight actually escalates when Kenpachi's eye patch is knocked off as it unleashes his full spiritual pressure, and even with this spiritual pressure boost, Noitra still remains formidable, especially after releasing his Zanpakuto Santa Teresa, which grants him 4 arms with scythe-like weapons being equipped onto each arm. As the fight intensifies, Noitra inflicts some serious wounds against Kenpachi, who responds with increasing delight at finding such a worthy opponent. The final moments of this fight come when Kenpachi is pushed to his absolute limit, as he then employs his kendo training, where he had studied with Yamamoto the art of holding his Zanpakuto with 2 hands. This marks a major development in Kenpachi's character as he overcomes his aversion to formal techniques out of necessity. The resulting strike is devastating as it cuts through Noitara's released form as it inflicts a fatal wound against him. Even as Noitra falls, he refuses to accept defeat, demanding that the fight continues, as this parallels Kenpachi's own philosophy of fighting to the death. This creates a cruel relatability between both of these fighters, as Kenpachi ultimately respects Noitara's desire for a warrior's death as he delivers the final blow against the Arrancar. The Spirits Are Forever With You light novel explains further context to this battle, as it reveals that Aizen considered Kenpachi and Yamamoto to be the biggest threats to his plans. Aizen specifically wanted to avoid fighting Kenpachi until after awakening the Hyokyoku, suggesting that even with his tremendous power, Aizen recognized Kenpachi as a genuine threat. This retroactive information elevates the significance of Kenpachi's victory over the 5th ranking Espada. He wasn't just defeating one of Aizen's subordinates here, but he was actually proving himself worthy of Aizen's cautiousness. The fight with Noitora also demonstrates significant growth from the Soul Society arc. Against Ichigo, Kenpachi had refused to acknowledge the value of techniques beyond raw power. Now, when he's faced with an opponent whose defense had seemed to be impenetrable, he willingly employs Kendo, showing an evolution in his approach to fighting. While still prioritizing the thrill of battle, Kenpachi highlights a pragmatic willingness in order to use whatever means which are necessary when he is truly challenged. Kenpachi partakes in another key battle during the Fate Karakura Town arc, and this is where he and Byakuya simultaneously fight against the zero-ranking Espada, Yami Largo. What makes this confrontation so unusual is how much of it happens off-screen in both the manga and the anime. For this reason, this battle against Yami has unfortunately left readers with more questions than answers about how the fight had progressed. The battle had started in chapter 379 when Kenpachi and Byakuya had arrived at Ichigo's location within Hueco Mundo. Kenpachi immediately slices off Yami's leg, displaying his characteristic direct approach. This prompts a heated exchange between Kenpachi and Byakuya as each claim the right to finish off the Espada. Their rivalry takes center stage during this battle as it overshadows the actual threat that has been posed by Yami. When Yami recovers and he fires a Saro at both of the captains, they dodge easily as they continue their bickering while treating the massive Espada almost as an afterthought. This dynamic shifts dramatically when Yami activates his Resurrection called Ira as it transforms him into a colossal beast which dwarfs the surrounding landscape. Yami explains that anger is his power, and the more enraged that he becomes, the stronger that he grows. Now, for some reason, Kubo cuts away from this battle entirely, and when we finally return to the fight in chapters 422 and 423, we see only its aftermath, as both of the captains are standing victorious over a defeated Yami, as they are arguing about which of them landed the final blow. Their injuries suggest that the battle was difficult. Both of them appear to treat the fight as merely an annoyance rather than a serious threat. What we can infer about Kenpachi's power level at this point in the story is that it is substantial. Despite Yami being revealed as the zero-ranking Espada, and he is theoretically stronger than all of the others, Kenpachi treats him as an annoyance rather than a worthy challenge, and this suggests that post-Noitora, Kenpachi's power had increased to the point where even the strongest ranking Espada couldn't provide a satisfying battle for the captain. And again, like I mentioned earlier, if Aizen himself had feared Kenpachi's potential, perhaps Kubo's decision to off-screen the battle against Yami was a way for him to preserve the mystery of Kenpachi's upper limits in order for them to be revealed in later portions of the story. When it comes to the Fullbring arc, Kenpachi's involvement is brief but it's significant, as he partakes in a significant battle against one of the Fullbringers. After Ichigo regains his Shinigami powers, the Gote 13 members arrive in the world of the living in order to assist Ichigo in the battle against Execution. Kenpachi faces off against Giriko, a Fullbringer whose ability revolves around creating contracts with the gods of time. This fight takes place between chapters 463 to 465, and it is remarkably short, as it emphasizes how much Kenpachi has grown since his earlier battles. When he is first assigned to fight Giriko, Kenpachi actually complains to Byakuya, asking to trade opponents because Giriko seems too weak to provide an entertaining fight for him. This casual dismissal illustrates how Kenpachi's standards for worthy opponents have escalated over the course of the story. During their brief fight, Giriko mocks Kenpachi as a fool who relies solely on strength, attempting to position himself as intellectually superior to him. Giriko activates his enhanced Fullbring called Time Tells No Lies as he transforms into a muscular giant. He then explains that the simpler his contracts become, the more powerful his ability grows, and he's now created a contract which is focused purely on strength enhancement. Just as Giriko declares himself to be the strongest, Kenpachi cuts him in half with a single swing of his sword, ending the battle almost instantaneously. When asked about the fight afterwards, Kenpachi simply states that it was boring, a stark contrast to his usual enthusiasm when he is facing off against supposedly powerful opponents. What's evident during the Fullbring arc is that Kenpachi is still only seeking worthy battles, and he no longer wastes his time with opponents who cannot satisfy his thirst for a challenge. We now turn our our attention towards the 1000-Year Blood War arc, which represents the absolute peak of Kenpachi's character development, as it features his most major battles and the full reveal of his true potential. This arc transforms our understanding of Kenpachi from a battle-hungry captain to perhaps the most strongest Shinigami within the entire history of the Soul Society. Kenpachi's involvement in this story arc begins with style in chapter 502, where he confronts the invading Sternritter forces. In a stunning display of power, he arrives before Yhwach with the bodies of 3 defeated Sternritter thrown over his shoulder. He beats Sternritter R. Jerome, Sternritter Y. Lloyd, and Sternritter Q. Bernice. This insane feat immediately establishes Kenpachi's threat level, as it positions him as one of the key members in the frontline defense of the Soul Society. Now, this initial victory is quickly subverted when Kenpachi faces what appears to be Yhwach, but it's actually Royd Lloyd in disguise. Despite his confidence, Kenpachi is utterly defeated off-screen, as it establishes the Vandenreich leader's overwhelming power, as it sets up Kenpachi's need for further growth during this arc. This defeat leads to the most transformative battle in Kenpachi's development, as he fights with Retsu Unohana in chapters 523 to 527. Now, this happens after the newly appointed Captain Commander Shunsui Kyoraku orders Kenpachi to train with Unohana. We then learn Unohana's true identity as the original Kenpachi and the Soul Society's most notorious criminal, who was a part of the original Gotei 13 as the first captain of the 11th Division. The confrontation between Kenpachi and Unohana isn't merely training, but it's an actual fight to the death that's been orchestrated to unlock Kenpachi's true potential. We learn a major truth about Kenpachi's power level, as the young Kenpachi had actually been stronger than Unohana at the time, but strangely his desire to prolong his fight against Unohana, battle with Unohana, because it was a rare experience of him fighting a worthy opponent, it had resulted in him unconsciously suppressing his own power. This created mental barriers that would remain with Kenpachi for centuries. Unohana's strategy is as brutal as it is effective, as she repeatedly brings Kenpachi to the point of death and heals him, as she breaks through every single mental barrier with each near-death experience that Kenpachi goes through. Through flashbacks, we witness their first meeting, and we understand the origin of Kenpachi's fighting philosophy. As the fight against Unohana progresses, Kenpachi returns to his original unrestrained strength. Towards the end of the fight, Kenpachi fatally wounds Unohana, who dies satisfied that she had restored him to his true strength, as she feels no longer guilty for the sin that she had committed all those years ago. During this moment, Kenpachi finally hears the voice of his Zanpakuto Nozarashi. This is the final step in his evolution as a Shinigami. This battle serves as both a conclusion and a new beginning for Kenpachi Zaraki, as it resolves his century-long storyline with Unohana, while also opening the door to previously unimaginable power, as he finally forms a bond with his Zanpakuto. Kenpachi then finds himself battling against Sternritter V Gremi Thamu between chapters 573 to 579. Kenpachi showcases some of his newly awakened potential, as Gremi's ability the Visionary manifests imagination into reality. This is theoretically the perfect counter to Kenpachi's straightforward fighting approach, but yet what follows is a fascinating psychological and physical fight. When Gremi begins to create increasingly deadly scenarios like lava flows, vacuum-sealed spaces, and ultimately a meteor that is large enough to destroy the Serite, Kenpachi responds by finally releasing his Shikai. Nozarashi emerges as a massive axe-cleaver hybrid weapon, destroying the massive meteor with a single swing. Towards the conclusion of Kenpachi's battle against Gremi, we learn about the true nature of his power and the upper limits of it. When Gremi attempts to imagine himself with strength that is equal to Kenpachi's, Gremi's body tears itself apart, as he is unable to contain such power within his vessel. This outcome perfectly encapsulates Kenpachi's essence. He is a natural monster whose very existence defies conventional limitations. Kenpachi's final major battle within the manga sees him fight against Sternritter M the Miracle Gerard Valkyrie. This battle takes place between chapters 666 to 680. This prolonged fight against Gerard shows us the ceiling of Kenpachi's power and the fundamental limitations that he currently has. The miracle converts damage into size and power as it creates an escalating challenge which brute force alone cannot overcome. Kenpachi finds himself fighting alongside Hitsugaya and Byakuya, as Kenpachi initially dominates the battle but eventually finds himself overwhelmed by Gerard's continuous growth. During this critical moment, Yachiru appears before Kenpachi as she guides him in order to activate his Bankai. Kenpachi's Bankai transformation is truly monstrous, as his skin turns red, horns grow from his forehead, and his blade becomes jagged and vicious. With this power, Kenpachi effortlessly tears apart the giant Gerard. However, Kenpachi's own body soon begins to break under the strain of channeling such overwhelming energy. His arm is actually seen to shatter as a result of his own power. The fight against Gerard conclusively reveals Yachiru's true nature as the manifestation of Kenpachi's Zanpakuto spirit. Both her disappearance and integration with Kenpachi completes his development arc, as he goes from a Shinigami who couldn't even hear his Zanpakuto to one whose body cannot fully contain its released power. The fights that Kenpachi partakes in during the 1000-Year Blood War arc collectively highlight his full potential finally being unleashed. From his defeat at Yhwach's hands to his transcendent power with his Bankai activation, Kenpachi's journey embodies the story arc's themes of hidden histories and unleashed potential, as it positions Kenpachi as arguably one of the most powerful and strongest Shinigami in the Soul Society. We now turn our attention towards the light novel Spirits Are Forever With You, as this provides some critical insights and additional context to Kenpachi's battle history. The Spirits Are Forever With You light novel fills the gaps in the official manga timeline, and it introduces us to new powerful opponents who further test Kenpachi's growing powers. The events of this light novel are set during the 17-month time skip between the defeat of Aizen and the Fullbring arc. This light novel is written by Ryogo Narita under the supervision of Tite Kubo. This 2-volume light novel focuses on two very powerful prisoners from Muken. These are none other than Soya Azashiro and Shien Granz. Both of these characters force Kenpachi Zaraki to push beyond his previous limitations. Shien Granz is a clone of the original Xyle Aparo at the height of his power, when he was the 0-ranking Espada before he was demoted. Shien Granz possesses abilities that are far beyond the 8th-ranking Espada, which Mayuri had defeated during the Hueco arc. His scientific genius combined with his tremendous spiritual pressure, it makes him a very formidable opponent. Kenpachi's battle with Shien begins when he infiltrates the Soul Society in order to recover Xyle Aparo's corpse from Mayuri's lab. When Kenpachi confronts him, Shien displays power comparable to Yami Lago's released form, establishing him as arguably the strongest Arrancar in the series. What makes this fight especially interesting is how it forces Kenpachi to battle an opponent with both overwhelming strength and scientific cunning. Unlike Xyle Aparo's reliance on tricks, Shien Granz prefers direct combat due to the influence of his brother Ilfert's soul within him. This results in a prolonged battle of strength that pushes Kenpachi Zaraki to remove his eye patch. Although the fight ends prematurely when Soya Azashiro arrives, it demonstrates Kenpachi's growth and his ability to contend with Espada-level opponents without requiring his full power immediately. Now, the most major fight that occurs during the Spirits Are Forever With You light novels occurs between Kenpachi and Soya Azashiro, the 8th Kenpachi who had been imprisoned within Muken for 250 years after he had attempted to revolutionize the Soul Society through questionable means. Soya Azashiro possesses perhaps the most conceptually broken Zanpakuto in Bleach. His Zanpakuto Urozakuro allows him to fuse with anything in his surroundings, from the air to the buildings to even people. This ability does make Soya Azashiro nearly impossible to defeat through conventional means, as he is able to disperse his consciousness throughout the environment, as he can sense everything within his fused territory and he can attack from any direction. Even the likes of Captain Shunsui and Ukitake had been unable to defeat him 250 years ago, requiring the intervention of the Zero Division to take out Soya Azashiro. What makes Kenpachi Zaraki's confrontation with Azashiro interesting is how it pits Kenpachi's straightforward power against an opponent who cannot be defeated through direct attacks. Initially, Azashiro holds the advantage in the fight, as Kenpachi is unable to cut what he cannot isolate. However, as the fight progresses, Kenpachi's tremendous spiritual pressure begins to burn Azashiro when he attempts to fuse with Kenpachi's body. Again, it's during these light novels where we understand that Kenpachi subconsciously adjusts his power level in order to match his opponents, thus allowing for more enjoyable battles. When Kenpachi is up against an opponent like Azashiro whose power keeps shifting, this adaptability becomes Kenpachi's greatest strength. As Aizen had noted, had Azashiro immediately used his full power instead of gradually escalating it, he might have actually overwhelmed Kenpachi Zaraki before the latter could have adapted to him. Kenpachi's sheer spiritual pressure eventually forces Azashiro to release his Bankai, as he temporarily unfuses from his surroundings in order to concentrate his power into a direct attack. This creates the opening that Kenpachi had needed, as it allows him to land a devastating strike which nearly kills the 8th Kenpachi. This victory demonstrates Kenpachi's tactical adaptability despite his reputation for brute force, as he recognized Azashiro's pattern and he exploited the moment when his opponent concentrated his power. These fights from Spirits Are Forever With You reveal Kenpachi's growing combat instincts and his ability to overcome conceptually superior abilities through sheer force and adaptability. Now we turn our attention towards the Can't Fear Onward light novels, which are another series of books written by Ryogo Narita under the supervision of Kubo. Now, the Can't Fear Onward light novels take place 6 months after the defeat of Yhwach, and they explore the power vacuum that was created by the Soul King's death and the subsequent restructuring of the Soul Society. Now, this series of light novels features a post-Thousand Year Blood War Kenpachi at the height of his power, after having fully awakened Nozarashi, and after him having briefly accessed his Bankai. While Can't Fear Onward mainly focuses on Shuhei Hisagi's journey, Kenpachi does play a significant role in several major fights here. These battles showcase how Kenpachi fights after his complete awakening, and they provide us with context for his current power ceiling within the Bleach universe. Kenpachi's major battle in these light novels occurs when he faces off against Hikone Ubuginu, an artificial hybrid being that was created by Tokinada Tsuneyashiro as a potential replacement for the Soul King. Hikone possesses fragments from all spiritual races, which include the Shinigami, Hollow, Quincy, and even Fullbringers, along with a piece of the Soul King itself. Additionally, Hikone wields the Zanpakuto Ikomikidomoe. This is an ancient blade that contains a primordial hollow which is so powerful it once defeated a young Head Captain Yamamoto. The fact that Head Captain Shunsui specifically assigns Kenpachi to fight Hikone speaks volumes about his confidence in Kenpachi's abilities, as he considers Kenpachi to be more capable than even himself for this given situation. During their fight, Kenpachi highlights a level of combat awareness that he has previously not shown. He instantly recognizes Hikone's use of Blut Veen, as he compares it to when Ichigo briefly used the technique in their fight, despite Hikone's ability to simultaneously use Shinigami, Hollow, and Quincy techniques, as they combine Shumpo, Sonido, Harenhyaku, and Fullbring movements into a single high-speed technique. Kenpachi is still able to keep pace with Hikone without any difficulty. What's even more interesting about this fight is how differently post-Thousand Year Blood War Kenpachi fights compared to his earlier iterations. Rather than relying solely on brute strength, he carefully analyzes Hikone's abilities, identifying the pattern of their attacks as he counters accordingly. When Hikone combines the Iron Skin of the Arrancar and Blut Artery for offense, while using the Iron Skin and Blut Veen for defense, Kenpachi is able to systematically break through the efforts of Hikone with precisely calculated strikes. Despite Hikone's immense power and the versatility of their moveset, Kenpachi dominates the fight while still wearing his eye patch. Only when Kenpachi decides to enjoy the battle fully does he remove the eye patch, which suggests that he is now capable of handling a Soul King candidate level opponent without accessing his full power. This represents an astronomical leap from the Kenpachi who struggled against Ichigo during the Soul Society arc. Later during the Can't Fear Onward light novels, Kenpachi confronts an empowered Ikomikidomoe after it absorbs most of Hikone's power and the fragments of the Soul King. This ancient hollow, described as potentially capable of destroying the balance of the Bleach universe if it is fully awakened, should represent one of the most formidable threats in all of Bleach. However, Kenpachi defeats Ikomikidomoe with a single swing of his Shikai, expressing disappointment at its weakness. Very few individuals within Bleach can rival Kenpachi's strength. Kensei Muguruma explicitly states that only Ichigo and Aizen are known to rival or surpass Kenpachi in raw power. Given that these two individuals represent the peak of power in the series, one being a perfect hybrid with sulking potential and the other being a transcendent being who had merged with the Hokyoku, this places Kenpachi amongst the top 3 most powerful characters in all of Bleach. While Ichigo inherited power from multiple races and Aizen merged with an artificial wish-granting orb that has tremendous power, Kenpachi on the other hand reached comparable heights through nothing but his innate ability and the breaking of his self-imposed limitation. The can't for your own world battles that Kenpachi partakes in cement Kenpachi's position as the strongest Shinigami in the history of the Soul Society. His ability to contend with and defeat beings infused with sulking fragments demonstrate how far he has truly come. What's even more impressive is that the fights that Kenpachi has partaken in suggest that he still hasn't reached his upper ceiling. After his fight with Hikone, he continues training and growing stronger, implying that even after the events of the manga, Kenpachi's journey towards greater power continues. This fits perfectly with his character, as he's a man who is defined by his insatiable hunger for battle and his constant pursuit for stronger opponents. And I am really looking forward to seeing what Kenpachi does in the upcoming Hell arc of the manga, as we do see Kenpachi briefly within the No Breeds from Hell one-shot chapter, and there has been a massive 12-year time skip where the events of the No Breeds from Hell one-shot chapter occur, so I do wonder how powerful Kenpachi has become in that time. Is Kenpachi finally able to overcome the limitations of his Bankai? Does he have full conscious control when he has activated his Bankai? And does it no longer have that weakness of self-destruction? I really am looking forward to seeing the future of Kenpachi's character and the evolution of his insane power. And it's for this reason that I wanted to chronologically highlight his progression from his days as a young boy within Rukongai to now being one of the most powerful captains within the Gotei 13. If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention about any of the battles that Kenpachi partakes in, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.